Welcome into a brand new year and a brand new fantasy baseball season. What else comes with New Year's? Resolutions, and us trying to keep to them. I'm Chris Welsh, and I have got 10 fantasy baseball resolutions that we're really going to try to hold on to. More than into January, like into our draft season. And in season, these 10 fantasy baseball resolutions can hopefully help us all become better fantasy baseball people. And, overall people as well. But I don't know if these are going to help you with that. So let's get to it, starting with number 10. If you love fantasy baseball, it's time for Dynasty. I know there's a lot of people that have not dipped their toes into the Dynasty, or we'll even call it the keeper realm, but you really should give a consideration to it. So this is not a resolution for me because I'm a Dynasty guy, and it really has become my favorite format. All the same fundamentals as you would do in a normal redraft league, but now you get extra credit. Remember that 18th rounder that became a first rounder? You can have him for years to come. If you use rounds as a specific marker, then you can keep him for that round. And maybe year over year, that moves up. Or you can only keep a certain amount of players or for a certain amount of time. Guess what? Dynasty, you get to choose exactly how you want to do it. You can use prospects. You can have a full-on draft with prospects. You can have a minor league system. Play around with it. Have fun. If you want to expand your love for fantasy baseball, consider checking out a Dynasty or Keeper League. And guess what? I got you covered because I do both prospect and Dynasty ranks, which you can find on FantasyPros. Number 9, let's get to the nitty gritty here. Don't let draft runs dictate how you draft. Hopefully you know what I mean by this. You're in a draft and all of a sudden the closers start going. And what does everybody do? Oh, closer. And all of a sudden 8 of the 12 picks in your round have become closers. So listen, you obviously have to pay attention to draft runs. But what I see happens in a lot of leagues is people with a plan will have their plan broken by a specific start of some type of a draft run. It gets people freaked out. Oh no, catchers are starting to go. Oh no, the closers are going. Man, it's been a big, heavy round of starting pitchers. Maybe I shouldn't wait as long as I've been waiting. Pay attention so you know when you might need to start pressing. But don't deviate from your plans just due to a specific run. There's so much, and we're going to talk about it here in a little bit as well. There's so much we've learned in the value of what you're going to find in later rounds at every single position. Not to say that, every position is deep, but if you do it right, you can pick back up specifically and especially off of like a categorical thing like saves. You're looking for a certain type of player. We'll talk about that as well. Starting pitching. Just don't let your draft plan be dictated by a run that people are going to start. If anything, you can use that by drafting to your advantage and how you are going to draft while everybody else is freaking out. Then you can jump back and you can pick up where everybody was using that run a little bit later. Now, of course, things can change in Roto. Really don't suggest punting. And if enough closers go, it can get scary. But just don't let draft runs dictate your draft. Let your board, let your ranks, let your decision-making be the dictator of how you do your draft. Number 8. This is a big one. This is one for me as well. Be more aggressive early on your wire in season. Don't miss out on the next Garrett Crochet. Garrett Crochet was a player that probably went undrafted in a lot of spots. Started out a little bit early, but everyone's like, ooh, the White Sox aren't good. I don't know. Don't know if I want to make this move. How about Lawrence Butler? Lawrence Butler came out swinging. He's an A. Then he struggled a little bit and came back up. Pay attention to the fundamentals and specifically be open to being more aggressive early on in the season because these are the type of players that could hold on throughout the entirety of the season. And this also kind of speaks to maybe not holding on to a death grip to certain players for too long. Sometimes a player is going to tell you who they are. Obviously, sometimes you don't want to let them go too early. But I really do think if there's a point of being aggressive, it is early on in the season. Mid-year, people have lost some of their fab, their waiver wires. You're all vying and fighting for the same thing. It's the same prospects that end up coming up. But these new players that are ready for the breakouts, they're going to show it to you relatively early on in the season. So just don't be afraid of spending a little bit more on a pitcher, even when, he's having a really good run and people are saying he's nothing more than a streamer. Maybe it's going to hold. Luis Gil would have something to say about that. So be a little bit more aggressive early in the start of the fantasy baseball season. Number 7, this is a player specific one. And this one is for me. Look at yourself hard and long in the mirror before drafting Jacob deGrom. I know I'm picking on a player, picking on a couple players in this overall, but Jacob deGrom is a kryptonite. And I'm going to talk about another player that's a little bit later, but this one specifically, just want everyone to really look at yourself hard before you make this jump. And the reason I'm saying it is Jacob deGrom is one of the most talented players in all of baseball. My kryptonite are players that are insanely talented, but get hurt a lot. And then when they return, they're still amazing. If the talent and the overall production starts to dip, I think that can tell you something, but that happened with Mike Trout. It always happens with Jacob deGrom. When he's out here, he puts out elite numbers, elite baseball savant thing. Everything tells you the stuff is great, stuff plus. It's all there with Jacob deGrom, but he's always hurt. So why am I picking on Jacob deGrom for this? Because he has a current early NFBC ADP of 40 overall, not 40 at pitcher, 40 overall. He came back last season a little bit early, so we were able to get some innings in. So from a projection standpoint, he's looking like he's going to pitch for the majority of next season, which is obviously what gets people excited. We've had years where he's come in a little bit late and run into spring training, and then bam, he gets hurt. Ideally and theoretically, he is set to come back and pitch an entire season. But that ADP, you are going to have to pay for. He's currently going between George Kirby and Dylan Cease. Jacob deGrom, I love. But from a player standpoint, a New Year's resolution, I, Chris Welsh, have to look hard and long at the mirror before I start investing a third-round pick in Jacob deGrom. Which leads us to number 6. Understand that all your pitchers are going to get hurt. There's just nothing you can do about it. Maybe you'll get lucky. Good for you, but they're all getting hurt. Let's just run through just a couple as of recent. Shane McClanahan, elite. We love him. Gone. Sandy Alcantara, he goes all the innings, and he's gone. Yuri Perez, Tommy John, he's going to return halfway through this year. All the talent in the world, gone. Glasnow, missed time. Yamamoto, missed time. You name them. We probably lost them for some period of time. So you can look at that as two ways, by the way. You could go, well, they all get hurt. So you can look at that in two ways. You can go, but Welsh, who cares? Jacob deGrom is going to get hurt, but they all get hurt. Let's bet on the talent. Kind of a hard argument. And that's probably why he's going as high as he currently is. But in the same token, you can also weigh and evaluate how often pitchers are getting hurt and how much they're getting hurt. And maybe that puts even more of a value on the guys that continuously get 190 innings. Obviously, I loosely say that all pitchers get hurt. People can be like, but Welsh, blah, blah. Of course, yeah, there's guys that, that's an extra value, even when they don't have like big strikeout numbers. Guys like Logan Webb and George Kirby, those guys continuously keep pitching. They get innings, and even if some of the counting stats are lower than some of the high-end players, there's an extra value on that. But in your overall evaluation, don't fool yourself into going, but this guy's safe. This pitcher is this. They're all going to get hurt. It's just a matter of time. This is not an anti-take starting pitchers early or anything like that, but just beware, they all get hurt. Number 5, do not draft the all-spring training team. We all need a good reminder of this, right? How about some 2024 reminders? Miguel Andujar with the A's hit .357 with 5 homers. Arizona Diamondbacks Blaze Alexander, A-plus name, hit .400, 2 homers, 5 stolen bases. How about Orioles' Kyle Stowers? He was tied or led all hitters with 7 home runs. All of them worthless in fantasy. Maybe they had their moments in the sun. Blaze Alexander had, a semi moment out there. But at the end of the day, this is to tell you is beware and be careful of the spring training hype. Every year we'll get a player that kind of jumps up. To be honest with you, looking at some of the spring training stats, there are some players that actually kind of thrived and ended up taking and putting this into the actual season. But as any piece of like crazy information that pops out there, just be careful and don't go nuts on an all spring training production standpoint, because that's most likely going to disappoint you. Number 4. This one, it's a very personal one. I don't think everyone's going to agree with this one, but stop worrying about closers, at least as much. Now, I say this to say that Clase, he worked out as one of the top closers. I believe he was 2 or 3 last year. And frankly, the top 5 this year looks pretty chalky. Hader did not perform at the level that people were all hoping for, but he still is kind of like a top 5 guy. Edwin Diaz is in there. And there are some of the same names that are out there. But that middle round of closers just had a lot of volatility. Ryan Helsley ended up being an absolute monster. And think of the closer rotations that changed throughout the year. I've said this kind of time in and time out, but closers are starting to become a little bit like running backs in fantasy. Now, they're not as valuable. Running backs are running backs, but it is in rotations. And it's like most places and most teams want to have more than one closer, and plenty will implement it like that. They might have, the normal guy, and then they might have the fireman guy, the high leverage closer. Some will put 3 out there. Some will just, I don't want this guy to pitch too much. That does give an extra value to, the workhorse running back / closers, the guys that are always going to go out there. But I do think that NFBC ADPs create kind of a chaos about closers in general. So I guess what I'm saying when I say stop worrying about closers is invest in the higher players, or take a breath and know that like the middle guys you're going to get some decent values on, and there's going to be a lot of players that are going to change. There's also so much that we don't know right now, early on in the season, about what the closer market's going to look like. So I would say don't panic and worry, kind of going back to that draft, following the draft trends and letting people dictate how you draft. Don't worry so much about closers. Number 3, draft more batting average. There was a period of time where I definitely was looking and saying, are there other things that we could punt? I think in pitching, if people were punting categories, I'm not a big category punt guy. People, obviously the most popular is saves. That would be the number one. If you're looking at hitting, people would punt stolen bases. It's not really a resolution, but chasing stolen bases is kind of a thing of the past. But that would be where people were looking. And then this new theory kind of came up. Maybe you could punt batting average. I'll tell you, punting batting average, A, has not been good for me. B, when I don't pay attention to batting average, it seems to be a big failure. The last 2 seasons, I've noticed a trend of myself is getting lost in the chase for homers, RBI, runs, catching up with pitching in the mid rounds, and not putting enough focus on batting average. Because here's a couple things. Qualified batters this year, only 7. Now, if you add outside of qualifications, you'll get more. But of qualified batters, only 7 hit 300 or higher. 41 total players qualified hit 270 or higher. That might seem like a lot, but if you play in a 15-team roto, that's 2 players. 2 players on average, 2.5, let's call it. If you had 3 players that were hitting over 270, you're in a good spot. Obviously, this is real baseball I'm talking about, and you can have other players that don't qualify. But so if we're being more realistic, like 5 or 6, and then how about this? Only 17 players hit 270 with 25 or more homers. Again, batting average can actually be a common denominator, but as something I've mentioned time over time as well, it's important batting average, full batting average. That's like with RBIs and home runs. Empty batting average, unfortunately, a guy like Luis Arraez doesn't feel great because they are lacking in stolen bases, they're lacking in home runs, they're lacking in RBI. All you're doing is picking up that category. But when you can pay attention to these 5-tool players, these guys that hit homers, steal bases, average, runs, RBI, Jarren Duran is a prime example. Those players, I believe, help your team exponentially. So paying attention to batting average is a really important thing, and not punting it. So in your drafts, put markers in players that get you quality. That's a better way to put it. Quality batting average with other counting stats. And I think it's going to do your team very, very well. Number 2, probably the most important, to be honest with you. Stop drafting injured players that are already injured. Also, maybe stop drafting players that continuously get hurt. So players that are already injured. Here's an example. And this was an individual player that I had thought about picking on here. Ronald Acuna. Ronald Acuna and both Spencer Strider, teammates, are already looking like they're not going to break camp with their team. They're going to miss time. They're kind of loosely saying like, hey, maybe it's just going to be April. It could be longer. That's a red flag. So, a 2B here would be, don't draft Ronald Acuna in the first 2 rounds. We've seen some early draft stuff where he was going around there. He was going outside the top 30s. He's moved up as of recent. think it's risky. By the way, I'll just throw out to you as well, like Acuna says he's going to stop running as much, or he might in theory stop running as much. So that's kind of a warning sign. So any player that is already nursing kind of significant injuries going into the year, no thanks. So Yuri Perez, he's going to come back from Tommy John. No thanks. I'm not going to be interested, even if he could be good on the second half. I'd rather pick him up unless you got he's cheap and free and you got an IL spot. But also, this is my biggest crutch. New Year's resolution to me, please pay attention to the dudes that are always hurt. Always. They'll show you. Ronald Acuna is maybe slowly kind of falling into that territory. But who are those guys? Giancarlo Stanton, Byron Buxton. But there are new guys that are coming up. Tyler Glasnow seems to be one of those guys. I'll throw it to you. Jazz Chisholm has a pretty strong track record of being hurt. And there's quite a few of these players really, really try to avoid too much injury risk. That's the main thing. You can draft an injured guy or two. You can find really good value. Don't take on tons of injury risk. It's not worth it. It's really not. You can move in other directions. Maybe sometimes it doesn't feel good to pass up on Ronald Acuna in the second round for, Rafael Devers. Rafael Devers got some injury stuff, but at the end of the day, he has had more of a long-standing hold on games played. Rather have the guy being out there than the theory of them. So don't put as much stock as you have been on those injured players. And number one, this is my favorite. It's not the most important, even though I put it at number one. If you got eliminated this year in your playoff and your first response was to go, I was the best all season long. We've got to play Roto. If you found yourself complaining and crying and freaking out because you were so good all season long, and then in the playoffs, when variance happened, you got eliminated and you started to get mad and freak out, you should play Roto. Roto is the help for that. So I jest and I have fun with it. Understand and find the format that fits you best so you have the most fun in fantasy baseball. That's probably the best resolution of all of them. Have fun this season. Find ways to have the most fun in fantasy baseball. Play Dynasty. Make safer teams. Play Roto if you're in head-to-head. And play with us at FantasyPros. We'll help you make a lot of those good decisions, hopefully at least. FantasyPros.com. Make sure you check us out all season long. The Draft Wizard is coming up. My playbook for your draft. All your draft plans. And we've got you here on the podcast and the YouTube channel for draft prep all season long, from mock drafts and more. We've got the tools to make your fantasy baseball season as much fun as possible, because that's the key. Have fun, make money, beat your friends, but have so much fun. And if you guys have got fantasy baseball resolutions of your own, drop them below in the YouTube chat. Love to see what you guys are saying, what you need to change for your teams, your drafting habits, and more. Maybe one of these you like the most, or maybe one of these you are going to implement the most. Do it and let us know. You can find me on the Twitter at @IsItTheWelsh if you've got more fantasy baseball resolutions. But if you're looking for all the fantasy baseball, stick it right here. Make sure you got notifications turned on and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got so much coming your way. Thank you guys as always for hanging out, and hopefully a brand new and amazing fantasy baseball new year to you. We'll talk to you next time right here on Fantasy Pros MLB.